What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Triple H podcast. Happy Hour Hoops, your one stop shop for enjoying a cold beverage and listening to our ice cold basketball takes. Everything NBA all the time. We got it here, guys. A loaded show today. A couple of breaking stories that just came out today, going over a little Memphis mania with John Morant and the Grizzlies, some Central Division and the Eastern Conference talk. Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee, and then a little MVP race at the end. Donovan Holden here with Jake Micah as always. Jake, we got some interesting stuff to talk about today. We thought that we'd maybe just drool over what John Morant and the Grizzlies are doing, but then we got hit with a couple of stories and turned into a loaded show.
Yeah, this was supposed to just be a jaw love fest, and it will be. It's still going to be eventually at some point, but we got to start with the two tentpole franchises in the NBA who both today decided to drop some major, not even themselves dropping major news, but major rumors coming out from two very trusted sources with both teams. We'll start over in LA though with the Los Angeles Lakers. Obviously, we've touched on their continued struggles the last couple weeks. We talked about the state of Los Angeles basketball last week, and I think between you, me, Ty and Slick, we weren't very optimistic about the future of what the Lakers basketball is even going to look like, even with Anthony Davis ramping up his return. And we found out today that, according to The Athletic, Frank Vogel is coaching for his job. He's basically being evaluated on a game-by-game basis at this moment. They really wanted to start doing this in December before the Christmas Day game, but obviously Frank Vogel was out for 12 days in the COVID protocols. David Fizdale came in, went 1-4 as the head coach, acting head coach. Vogel came back. They won 3 straight games. Things started looking up, and now it's back to the more inconsistent play that they have had. So, Dunny, Frank Vogel on the hot seat. Should he be on the hot seat, though?
Whew. Yeah, it's a loaded question. I mean, I think ultimately yes, just because of all the different types of hardships I feel like the Lakers have had this season. Like,
Yeah.
you can't put the blame of him pretty much never having this complete roster this entire season, but at a time where COVID's happening for every team and injuries still happen for every team. That really can't be too much of an excuse. He's clearly not getting the best out of his guys and hasn't been this entire season, with the exception of LeBron, because obviously LeBron, who we're going to talk about later, is still being King James and having himself an MVP type season.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, this is the Los Angeles Lakers. You started by saying one of the most storied franchises in the NBA. I mean, expectations are high. A LeBron James led team, expectations are high. So yeah, I mean,
For sure.
Vogel definitely has to take some of the blame for this. And Stephen A had an interesting comment today about it. He was saying that the Lakers organization has, they're allowed to have this gripe with Vogel because he's supposed to be this defensive minded head coach, and he's put together 2 top 5 defenses in the past 2 years before this, and of course a lot of that during the bubble season when Anthony Davis was kind of playing out of his mind, and they were a super defensive minded team. But now, they're bottom half in I think every defensive category in the NBA this year.
Pretty much.
Vogel's still the head coach. So yeah, I mean, he definitely, maybe not all the blame, but definitely a good part in it. And I'm not surprised by, that he's kind of being evaluated for his job right now. I think the news is a little shocking just because there wasn't much buzz about it before. But now that the fact that it's out, I don't think it's too surprising.
So now the fact that it's out, like it's gonna happen, right? Like this is, I mean, how what would need to happen? I guess AZ coming back, looking like an MVP,
right?
Yeah. But we've talked about the roster in itself, just the fact how flawed it is, and if this isn't the guy to maximize it, you really gotta and I don't know if it's all his fault. I mean, I think he does share blame, because they're not playing well defensively, and that's was supposed to be his strength, is even if they didn't have the clientele on the roster to get it done, he's still supposed to put together like a competent defensive team. And again, Anthony Davis is supposed to be the anchor of that defense too, and he just hasn't been available and hasn't been himself when he's on the floor. So how much can that blame be put on Anthony Davis? I think there's a lot, but you can't fire Anthony Davis. You can't fire LeBron James. You can fire Frank Vogel. And unfortunately, we've seen this with a lot of coaches with LeBron. I don't think this is a similar case, even compared to other coaches who have, underperformed, I guess, like a David Blatt. I think LeBron has a great amount of respect for Frank Vogel and what he's been able to do the last couple of years with them. But sometimes you just need a new voice. And this team isn't built to be a defensive-minded team. Maybe this team needs somebody that comes in and is like, no, we need to be in shootouts and runs a more offensive-friendly style or a more open style. And obviously that's going to open up this team to more struggles defensively. But, I mean, you kind of got to work with what they got. They've got shooters all over. They're much more built to be an offensive team, a run up and down the floor team who shoots a lot of threes, high volume, that kind of team, than they are a defensive minded team at this point. And that's where I think the disconnect is starting to come with Frank Vogel. And I think that failure is as much on Rob Pelinka's fault and GM LeBron, however they ended up assembling this team. But he's the guy who's supposed to get the job done, and they just haven't gotten the job done this year. And it doesn't look like even what they've had that he's been able to maximize it, really.
No, it doesn't. It's too bad. But you know what? One positive we can take from this, and a guy who's been catching a lot of hate, and we kind of said that stuff would turn around for him lately. The Lakers did beat the Jazz last night, and Russ had a monster poster on Rudy Gobert. So hopefully, maybe Vogel was in the background of a couple of those highlights where Russ was posterizing Gobert, and it can be a good look for the whole team. But
for sure,
yeah, I don't know. It's definitely some weird times in LA right now. Vogel on the very hot seat, and we'll see how that plays out. The other thing here is one of the other most storied franchises in NBA history, the Boston Celtics. Apparently there's trade talks. Ime, quote straight from the coach, Ime Udoka, said that Brad Stevens took about 10 calls after the afternoon game on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the victory over the Pelicans, and president of basketball operations, Brad Stevens, was apparently all over the phones involving trade talks shortly after that game. Then names were being thrown out, after that first report. Apparently, guys like Marcus Smart, Josh Richardson, and a few other third-year guys could be on the trading block for Boston. And then just names that I've seen while I was scrolling Twitter today was Jeremiah Grant and Jeff Green are possible guys that the Celtics may be going after. I saw the Jeff Green talks had no traction, but just someone that people knew the Celtics are interested in, a possible reunion for Uncle Jeff.
That would be great. That would be a great pickup, but you could see why a team, they wouldn't want to get rid of him. What do you, so it's clear, the names that are getting mentioned here, a Grant or a Green, it's clear where the Celtics think that some of their shortcomings are at the moment. And it's at that 4 position to kind of take the burden off of Tatum and Jalen as rebounders and defenders against bigger opponents and everything. But isn't the problem? if it's Marcus Smart they're talking about, if it's Schroeder, if it's Richardson, all those guys that you're planning are willing to get rid of, you've heard it from me a million times. I think this team just needs a true point guard. And I think this team has agreed the last 5 years, taking swings at Kyrie Irving and Kemba Walker, that the perfect thing for these guys is a true point guard. And if those 3 guards are the ones on the move, I just feel like getting a guard is more important than getting one of those other bigs. But what do you think, according to the roster construction now, and kind of, especially if we've heard the rumors, Brown and Tatum are not going anywhere. They are building around these guys. You can stop whoever is trying to start all these rumors and try to start the stuff that they're going to be better apart and all that stuff. It's not going to happen, at least not in the near future. They're going to try to make this work. So what can they do? What do you think they should do to try to make it work with what the moves they can make right now?
Yeah, well, I think if they brought in a guy like Jeff Green, I think them bringing in a more notable point guard in addition to Jeff Green would probably be the move. Because if you bring in a guy like Grant, he's obviously worth a lot more than a Jeff Green. So you're probably giving up a lot more if Grant comes in and he changes the style of your team and the way you play and the way you win a lot more than Jeff Green would just at this time in his career. I mean, Green's probably the only guy who's going to give you, 10 to 18 minutes a game
Yeah.
max, where Grant would probably find himself right in the starting lineup, if not the top 6 rotation. So I think bringing in a point guard in addition to Jeff Green makes sense. And then, it would we don't know if all these names are actually the people who are going to be involved in deals, right? Like we don't know if Green
Yeah.
and Grant are coming in. We don't really know if Dennis, Richardson, and Smart are all going to leave. So it's tough to say. I would agree. I think that we need, a point guard more than anything else.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that stands out to me with all the names that were thrown out in talks today is that, kind of exactly what you said, but Brad Stevens was making it known that he has no plan on sending away either of the Jays. And how he made that most noticeable was putting a guy like Marcus Smart's name out there, because this is hearsay in Boston. You don't throw
Yeah,
Marcus
that's
Smart's
true.
name
Yeah.
around in trade talks. I was telling you earlier today that, other than outside sources and national media and, fans that just truly can't appreciate Marcus Smart, like this dude's name is not in trade talks.
Yeah.
Everyone, up until this point in Boston knows that he embodies the Boston Celtics. He's always said that he feels safe and, Boston loves him. He loves Boston. So I think this is an eye-opening statement from the Celtics organization, from
For
Brad
sure.
Stevens, that, Smart, hey, look at this really nice asset to a championship roster. He's one of the guys we have on the block, but not the guys you keep calling about. Jays are off limits. Marcus Smart could be on the move. I don't know. I think if any of these guys get traded from the Boston Celtics, I think ultimately you receive the best package if Marcus Smart's on the way out. It would pain me to see, but I trust Brad Stevens, and we don't know enough right now. But I'm in agreement with you. I don't think you can give away all your primary ball handlers outside of the Jays and then just get like a stretch four back in return and think that everything's fixed.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's probably some issues that you can't fix. These are probably some things that you probably can't fix everything during this regular season. While that's disappointing for the expectations that they've had, like for the future, further longer term future of the Celtics, it makes the most sense to be more prudent and then try to make deals in the offseason when teams are more open to getting rid of more assets and you kind of see where the pieces lie. But I do think there are some moves here that can bolster this team for the playoff run that's going to happen. I mean, and this team has shown in playoff series that they can compete. They'll go out and compete with everybody. And I don't think I think the way the East is shaking out this year as we get into like the Central Division and everything else, there's no real unbeatable threat in the East. I mean, no. Milwaukee might be the closest thing, but they've looked like they kind of had like a NBA Finals takeover during the year. They haven't been dominant. They're currently 5th place in the Eastern Conference. Brooklyn has injury and, Kyrie, the issues noted there. Now Durant's hurt. Harden's been on and off injured throughout the year. So I think the East is wide open if you get into the playoffs and you're solidified and playing your best basketball during the playoffs. Who knows what could happen? This is the most wide open year we've had in the NBA in a long time. Speaking of having a wide open year, the Memphis Grizzlies, the biggest surprise on at least the Western Conference side, but probably in the NBA.
Probably
currently
NBA,
right now. Yeah, you have to be. They're in 3rd place now in the Western Conference. Ja Morant has just been on a tear lately. They recently had an 11-game win streak, beating the likes of Golden State. They beat up on Chicago yesterday. So, 2 impressive wins at home over the 2 top teams in each conference. The rest of the squad is balling out. Desmond Bane's having a breakout year. Dylan Brooks is getting his footing back under him after his injury last year and earlier this season. Jaren Jackson Jr. starting to get his feet back under him too. This team's clicking on all cylinders.
Adams, baby.
Steven Adams, our guy, just holding it down in the middle. So what is the ceiling of the Grizzlies? Is it too crazy to think of them as actual title contenders right now?
I think casual NBA fans would be scared if they heard us say that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you really can't count them out right now. I mean, this is a team that we've known, since Ja's been around, has been at least feisty. And when they were a playing team, you were like, you still saw something from them, and you're like, wow,
For
this
sure.
group can fight. Ja Morant is a gamer. He's a game winner. He makes game winning plays. And
Yeah.
it is really showing this year. I mean, he's putting on an MVP type campaign halfway through the year right now. So I think we just have to respect that the numbers that the squad is putting up and kind of leave it at that right now, because we have no idea. We've never really seen this group even in the playoffs outside of playing and bottom of the Western Conference. And here, like you mentioned, third seed in the West, but that's also best for third record in the entire NBA because they have
Man.
they have a better record than anyone in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
So it's the Suns, the Warriors, and the Memphis Grizzlies at the top of the league right now. I saw a couple power rankings coming into this week that had Memphis at number 1. Title contenders, I don't know. That'd be very impressive, but I think it'd be a very scary route for them to get out of the Western Conference to make it to the NBA Finals, just because of how loaded the top teams in the West are this year.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say no.
I think it's as good of a chance as anybody else in the West. And I think and I thought it's kind of crazy like you said, for casual fans, when you look at the Suns, who just made the finals last year, and then the Warriors, obviously we had know all their history, Clay coming back, all the good vibes going around there. But this team is like for real. Like this isn't like some flash in the pan win streak. This is a team that's been built well for years now, starting with Ja, starting with Jaren Jackson Jr. But I mean, we mentioned him quickly. Desmond Bane is now one of the best shooters in the NBA. He's a plus defender on the wing. He's only getting better. I mean, as the season has gone on, looked better and better. He's solidified his spot there, and it's kind of allowed Dylan Brooks to assume his natural role as like the 6-man spark plug off the bench. He's kind of a high volume shooter, but you need that guy on the bench. You need that kind of guy on your team, especially when things might not be going well. But the thing is that kind of energy doesn't really happen because Ja is always going to be going after people's throats. And I think that's kind of what is the most impressive thing about this team is they don't take their foot off the gas against teams. And it's because of him and his relentlessness and just the things he does on the court every night, athletic feats and all that. But they've really taken on that identity of what he kind of stands for with his reckless energy, his aggression. They talk there's been talks among multiple teams in press conferences and afterwards. The Grizzlies talk the most shit in the NBA right now. Like these guys are just out here just chirping the whole time. Like they're beating you down and talking shit to you about it right after. And it's got to be demoralizing when you have a young team with confidence like that. We've seen these teams break through, and especially in years like this where it's kind of wide open. I'm going to go back to the Oklahoma City Thunder 2012 and with a young Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook on that team. I think, saying like comparing Ja to an early Kevin Durant, I don't think that that's on the level of star that he is right now. I don't think that that's too crazy to think about. And the rest of this team is like just so well built. Kyle Anderson, a guy who does everything off the bench. Slow-mo, exactly. He reminds me of Sean Livingston, like on the Warriors teams. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not even been really good this year, and he's still one of the best bigs in the NBA. And if he's getting back into form and everything,
been solid for them too.
That's what I was trying to think about too. I mean, he's a big off the bench would be starting on. How many teams in the NBA, playoff teams even, would love to have that guy in their starting lineup?
Yeah.
This is a well-built team. This isn't just Ja and a bunch of dudes. Like this is a team that's deep. They're adaptable. They can play a bunch of different ways in a bunch of different styles of games. And I think especially when you compare them with Golden State and Phoenix, they honestly match up really well with both those teams across the board. So I think there's no doubt that they can play in the series. Right now, if season ended in the second round, they would be playing Golden State. I don't think Golden State would be favored in that series for sure, but I just don't think it's a wash like that. I think this team needs to be taken seriously in the West, even though they're this younger squad. We've seen these teams make the jump early. When I think the biggest example you can look at is the Suns last year and the Thunder from about 10 years ago.
Yeah, Ja. One last thing on Ja here. I feel like, as you were saying, and you brought up those old Oklahoma City Thunder teams, and then, you kind of made the comp to KD, just the way he's carrying the team. Like, the way that I look at Ja when I see him play, it's almost like he's a perfect mix of AI in the sense of like he just doesn't care who's in front of him. He's going to try to burn and beat you. And then like with a splash of early Westbrook's athleticism, where he kind of has the killer mentality of AI, where he thinks he can beat everyone in whatever type of skill set he has, and then that athleticism of OKC Russ, where he's just. I mean, we saw that block from a couple weeks ago where he's blocking guys with two hands, tries to dunk on nearly everybody, pick and fight with the entire Bulls team the other night, and then Steven Adams, the enforcer, coming in and just dragging Tony Bradley off like it was nothing. But yeah, I mean, this group is just super fun. They have the edge, they have the toughness, and their head coach Taylor Jenkins, like he's got to be in conversation for Coach of the Year.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think it's those three teams we keep talking about. Like,
Without
I think Steve Kerr, like with the Warriors too, just because like how much of a surprise it is, like how well they're doing, because they were just such a big question mark. But I mean, Taylor Jenkins right up there. Like you said, I think we just, as league wide, got to start giving Memphis some respect. Definitely a team that probably nobody, even the Suns and the Warriors, want to see in the playoffs.
Agreed. So let's go into some teams that, I mean, a couple other Coach of the Year candidates are on these teams for sure. The Central Division, we want to just touch on this, as right now it's easily the best division in the NBA. The Chicago Bulls leading the Central right now at 27-15. They're in first place in the Eastern Conference. The top of the East, I mean, not even the top of the East. Between first and eighth place is only separated by 5 games in the Eastern Conference. Between first and 10th place, it's 5.5 games. I mean, the East is a war zone right now and really can swing in a lot of different directions depending on how this season goes. So you have the Cleveland Cavaliers right now, who are in 4th place in the East, a game and a half back of the Bulls in first place.
Beat the Nets last night.
Beat the Nets last night, albeit without KD, but a nice win at home.
Still a dub.
Kyrie was there. I was wondering if he'd play in Cleveland, but he did play. Missed a couple of clutch jumpers at the end too, so that was really nice for the Cleveland faithful to see there. And the Bucks right there in 5th place, behind Cleveland and Chicago, which I think is the most surprising. I think Cleveland is the biggest surprise out of this group. No one expected them to be this good. Chicago, we kind of thought they'd be good, but being this good this far into the season is a moderate surprise. But Milwaukee being 3rd out of this entire group might be just the biggest surprise out of all 3.
Yeah.
I mean, so down the stretch, these teams, let's start with Milwaukee. Who do you think is the bigger threat to Milwaukee's throne in the East? Is it Cleveland or is it Chicago, or is it one of these other teams in the East that we should be, I mean, outside of the Nets, who we talk about a lot? Like, do you think that it's Chicago and Cleveland as the biggest threats to Milwaukee right now?
Yeah, I don't think so right now, but I think Miami will probably be in this conversation come playoff time as well. But I think between Cleveland and Chicago, I would give it to Chicago right now, just because of the confidence they're playing with, the way DeMar DeRozan's been playing, especially as of late. And then just the fact that Cleveland, I mean, you guys have been banged up all year, a couple of devastating injuries where you lose guys for a season, but it's even more impressive for them because they just continue to win, and they're kind of holding that spot, in the top quarter of the Eastern Conference, and they're just kind of chilling there right now. But that's really the only reason I'd give it to Chicago, is just because Cleveland does have those injuries. There's a few guys they're not getting back for the entire season. Obviously, that makes things tougher in the playoffs when you want to shorten your roster,
for sure.
And have a smaller rotation. And then, of course, Milwaukee, reigning champs, you probably want a little more firepower. And right now, I just think Chicago has that. So I would say just the gamers that Chicago have, the way DeRozan's playing. Levine obviously isn't playing right now, but he should be back in a few weeks because of his injury. I think those guys down the stretch would just be able to give Milwaukee a tougher contest this season.
I'm with you. I think it's the Bulls. I'm just the thing that the thing that's interesting about Chicago and Cleveland, like if you're just comparing those two, is Chicago's strength is clearly their offense. I mean, DeRozan been an MVP candidate. Levine's obviously one of the best scorers in the league. Ball has been incredible. Vucevic is a great scorer. Like they have weapons everywhere. Kobe White. I mean, Caruso is kind of like the perfect complementary piece offensively and defensively to them. But their defense is what's going to be lacking in the playoffs. And if they can see, like, haven't seen them really get tested, I guess. And this group in a playoff series, we haven't seen get tested. I think there are holes that a good team like Milwaukee or a Cleveland or a Miami can exploit over the course of a 7-game series. Maybe the first 4 games, it might be like Chicago. I think when it gets to playoff time is going to try to get to early leads in series and get out to sprints and make them shootouts early on because they know it tightens up. Now, DeMar DeRozan is one of the best half-court scorers in the NBA, so maybe this is going to be a moot point. I'm just worried about them defensively, and Cleveland, on the other hand, is a defensive juggernaut between Evan Mobley and Jared Allen at the rim. Their weakness is probably guard defense, especially with Sexton out and with no Rubio. Okoro is going to be asked to do a lot. So is Lauri Markkanen covering some wings that he's not ready to guard. But I think defensively they have higher upside just because of how adaptable Mobley and Allen are, especially like switching and everything. Like those guards try to take them every game. It's so funny, like watching so many Cavs games. It's so funny to watch like a point guard get at Jared Allen on a switch and be like, "Oh, he's food," and then just nothing. Like he's just literally nothing. So I think that's where the biggest thing is. Like especially in a matchup with Milwaukee, what would you want? Do you want to be the elite scorer? Because Milwaukee's going to be able to score and they're going to be able to lock you down. Like we know Milwaukee at their best is a force on both sides of the ball. I think the Bulls would have more success scoring on them, but a harder time defending them and vice versa for Cleveland. So it's kind of just more what you would prefer. I'm still leaning the Bulls just because the top end offensive talent. I think Cleveland, if Garland is kind of shut down, Cleveland is going to have issues getting points and getting offense generated when it comes to playoff time. These 3 teams versus the field in the Eastern Conference, who would you take? Yeah.
That's a heavy hitter right there. I think I'm taking these 3 teams.
Right?
And like I feel like right now that's just the easy answer because
so the other teams you're looking at without those you get Miami, Brooklyn, Philly basically are your top 3 teams out of that group, and then you get Charlotte, Washington, Boston, Toronto, Atlanta. You would still get. I think it's basically you're picking Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee, or Miami and Brooklyn. Unless the Sixers really change their team in a fundamental way, aka trading Ben Simmons, which doesn't seem like that's happening anytime soon. Yeah, I mean, I think you got to take the Central.
And the team that we really didn't touch on too much, while we're talking about these 3 is Milwaukee. We're kind of comparing how Chicago and Cleveland would go up against them. And even though they are the 5th seed right now, it's kind of the same thing I was talking about earlier in the year when they were the 3 seed and they kind of got off to a slow start and Giannis wasn't shooting the ball that great, off rip. It's almost I'm at the point where I'm still not worried about them being the 5th seed because of how close this race in the Eastern Conference is. Like I don't think any team in the East who's, won through play-in, and I'm not even just saying this because the Celtics are the 10 seed, but like I don't think anyone who's really sitting in their place in the standings right now I don't think that's a set thing. I don't think that's the thing we can
not at all
consider where they're going to be at come playoff time. It's definitely the more impressive teams who are the ones we're talking about, Chicago, Cleveland, Milwaukee, because they've kind of held that place all year. But at the end of the day, it is still such a tight race. I do still trust Milwaukee a lot. They are, they're the reigning champs. They've kind of dominated the regular season in the past 3 seasons. So I think that's why this is a little surprising to NBA fans that they're sitting 5th right now. But, at the end of the day, another guy we're going to talk about in the MVP conversation, Giannis, is playing his brand of basketball. He has not slowed down, at least in my opinion, since a season ago. And I still think you have to trust Milwaukee down the stretch. So If we're going these three versus the field right now, I'm taking these three, and I have a lot of confidence that Milwaukee will make me right on that.
Shout out the Central Division representing in the Eastern Conference. It's going to be a war in Milwaukee, Chicago, and Cleveland. I mean, right now a Cleveland Milwaukee first round series, if it ends, that would be awesome. But like you said, I mean, the fact that all these teams are pretty much all over the halfway point in the season now, and 1 through 11 in the East is separated by 6 games. The Eastern Conference, we knew this year how great it was going to be, or how great it potentially could be, and they're killing each other. Like these teams are just killing each other, and the standings are gonna. I think this is what it's gonna look like all year. I'm sure there's gonna be a little bit of separation eventually, but I think it's gonna be a pretty close East. And when you get into playoff matchups, it's just going to be who's matching up with who, and then we might get some big upsets because a good team ended up in the 6 or 7 seed, and just ended up with a favorable matchup ahead of time.
And it's so weird to even try to come to the conclusion still of what conference is better this year, because in the West you have those 3 juggernauts that are standing out. But is the Eastern Conference, is them being so close 1 through 11, like you say, is that, is that something that we can look at and say it's because this conference is better and there's more talent, so the competition's more stiff? Or is it that those 3 juggernauts in the West are far better than every team in the East too? So I feel like that flip-flopping question that everyone loves to debate on every year, who's better, Eastern, Western Conference. And there was a while there, like almost like a decade, where it was easy Western Conference for a bit. Now we're kind of in this middle ground, and I don't really know which conference I would say is better right now.
So if I can do quick math here, and I think I can, with the top 3 West teams, the Suns are 13-2 against the Eastern Conference, so very, very good. Looking for the Suns. The Warriors are 15-4 against the East, and Memphis is 8-5. So Memphis not having as much success against the East. They've played a lot more conference games than the other 2 teams. They're 23-10 in conference. Golden State 16-8, Phoenix 21-7. So they have definitely a couple more games in conference than those other teams. And then on the flip side, the Utah Jazz are 29-15 overall, but they are 10-10 against the Eastern Conference. So I think what we can determine out of this is our theory about those 3 teams standing out is definitely correct. And it shows as much just because of the line of delineation between Memphis and Utah against the East. Like Utah right now is a middle of the pack Eastern Conference team. They're 500 in the East. That would be, right within range of Boston and New York if they were playing in the Eastern Conference, who are both 500 right now. Close to 500 in conference. Toronto 13-13 as well. So I think that we're on to something there with Memphis, Golden State, and Phoenix. They're definitely setting themselves apart, and they've shown it by playing better against the East than their other West opponents. That's kind of what's setting them apart there. All right, so tomorrow night, all these 4 teams that we've talked about, they are playing against each other. Chicago and Cleveland, it is happening at 8:00 in Chicago. Memphis, Milwaukee, from Milwaukee, both at 8:00. Going to be a great window of basketball between these 4 teams. Chicago and Cleveland doesn't have a line right now. I'm assuming that's because we're waiting to hear on Levine news coming into tomorrow's game for Chicago, as he's still out with his lingering knee injury. He hasn't played the last couple nights, but still potentially could be back. Memphis, Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a 6.5 point favorite on their home court, which is not really that big of a favorite. I mean, that's usually in the NFL, it's -3 at home. It's -7 in the NBA. And so, I mean, the kind of half there on the court. So let's just do our money line. Let's just pick who we think is going to win. Chicago, Cleveland. What do you think the score is tomorrow night in that game? Actually, just both games. What do you think the score is?
Well, in Cleveland, if Levine doesn't play, I got Cleveland winning. If Levine plays, I think Chicago is going to win. But scores, I'll go Cleveland 112, Chicago 105.
Okay.
If Levine doesn't play, and then Grizzlies Bucks. Ooh,
that's the juicy game, man.
Yeah, I think I'm going Grizz 101, Bucks 99.
There we go. I love it. Big road win for the Grizz. I'm going with the
Yeah,
Grizz too. I'm going with the
let's
Grizzlies
go.
too. I
Let's
think
go, Ja.
111, 107 there. And then I'm going with the Bulls too. I can't pick Chicago. I can't pick Cleveland in Chicago. I think that the Bulls will pull that out in United Center in a close, like right down to the wire, like a 106, 105. Like maybe a DeRozan late clutch shot, either buzzer beater or late seconds, or just to put them up by 3 late in the game, something like that. DeRozan comes out because there's nobody on the Cavs that can touch DeMar DeRozan. And that's what worries me about that matchup. Levine and DeRozan might have their way with Cleveland's wings and guards, but going to be a fun game. I'm really excited as a Cavs fan to see where they kind of stand up with the Bulls. They had a great matchup earlier in the year. I got to check this out quick. I'm pretty sure it was a 1-point game earlier in the year when these two teams got together. Chicago. No, I lied. Cleveland blew them out 115-92 in December.
Was
And
that
that is their only
was that a
matchup so
big
far.
Darius Garland game, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, it was. Garland had 24 in this
Okay.
game. Ricky Rubio had a nice little game. So let's see here. Garland, 24 points, 6 assists. Mobley had 16 and 9. Jared
Nice.
Allen had a double-double. It was just kind of all over the place there. A tough shooting night for the
I definitely
Bulls
haven't
there.
been watching as much Cavs basketball as you. How's Rondo been for the Cavaliers?
He hasn't been, I wouldn't say he's been outstanding, but he's been desperately what they needed in just a secondary ball handler. Isaac Okoro coming back has been incredible because
he looked good last night.
Yeah. And that they really need him without Rubio and Sexton. They really need him to guard 2s and 3s. Like Okoro is vital to this team for guarding.
He's so
that
physical too, dude.
He's a beast. Remember, we did the live drafting. I had no idea who he even was.
Yeah.
Not anymore. I love Isaac Okoro. Yeah, so it's good to see him there. But Rondo, I think Rondo's been awesome. I think Rondo is exactly what they need. He's a great year for Garland. There's been good talk about them, like getting workouts in and just Garland picking his brain and everything. But it's exactly what they needed, just a secondary ball handler. Lamar Stevens has stepped up a lot. He's a guy that has been on this team in the G League back and forth. He's not anything flashy offensively, but if he can hit his open jumpers, he's a great defensive player. He gets a lot of energy. So they've gotten contributions from guys. Brandon Goodwin, who came in, signed up of the G League. He's given them some decent minutes. So the one thing that Kobe Altman has been able to do as a GM is kind of find guys that come out of nowhere and contribute to this team. And you look like a Joe Harris a couple years ago, who isn't on the squad anymore, but got discovered by the Cavs and really played. They got Dean Wade, Dylan Windler. I talked about Lamar Stevens. Like these guys, Kevin Pangos. These guys are who guys played serious minutes for the Cavs and played well in them. You've never even heard of them. They're not highly regarded guys. They're mostly G League guys. So they've done a good job filling in those spots around there. But Rondo's been fun. Rondo's been a good addition and just exactly what they needed. Just a veteran that they can trust with the ball, other than Garland. But Garland in his in his increased workload has just been balling.
Dude,
especially on that West Coast trip.
He is a bucket, bro. What are the chances, speaking, you just brought up the GM and kind of management here for the Cavaliers. What do you see them making a move before the deadline this season, or do you think they just stay put and kind of ride? I mean, they've obviously been having great success this season and kind of eye-opening success to the whole league. So, you wonder if they try to mess with this, almost if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's definitely a team that's depleted in some areas with the injuries that we talked about. And, given they might be a few pieces away from making a deep playoff push with the core they have.
So this has been a heavily debated topic among me and my fellow Cavs fans in my life. There's been a lot of talk about Karis LeVert, as he's kind of a guy that's been put in trade talks by Indiana, who he's a perfect fit. Don't get me wrong.
They want to trade like their whole team.
My biggest thing is I don't want to trade Colin Sexton in season right now. I know he's injured. I know, but I think he's a better asset if you re-sign him and maybe trade him next year if things aren't working out, because he can always get traded again, in a John Collins type situation where you just sign him to keep him and then explore options from there. Or or you use him in a sign and trade in the offseason when there's more players available who might better fit your team. I still like Colin Sexton on this team, honestly, as like the sixth man and closing games, because I think a lineup of Allen, Garland, Mobley, Okoro, and Sexton, I think that could be a closing lineup in the NBA and be a good one. So all that being said, Ricky Rubio is the one trade piece that is available because of his injury, and he's an expiring contract. So there's going to be some team that is, I mean, teams love expiring contracts. You get that money off. The Cavs have some picks to work with. I think that's the biggest move that they would look to do. And so if I'm looking at LeVert, like a Rubio, like Osman / Markkanen, maybe even move to get LeVert in, I'd be okay with that. But something big, drastic, I don't want to see. I don't want Sexton gone. Basically, that the big drastic move staying put. Want. Yeah, I think so. I think they'll keep him. He's only got next year, right? Maybe maybe that's an off-season thing, but I just think like you were talking about like the chemistry, the dynamics of the team and everything. Yeah. That would be something. If getting rid of Love during the season, I think would be a big hit to the chemistry and just everything going on.
Because he still gets really like he's invaluable minutes, especially lately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think if I was, if I had any control of what the Cavs are doing, I honestly think I would stay put. Mm-hmm. I think I would let guys like Mobley, like you're already overperforming for the season. I think management, coaching, I think they're, obviously they're not done yet. They're not putting a bow on the season because they're still very much competing, and they will the entire season, I think. But I don't think you messed this up. I think they did a good job, bringing in a veteran leader like Rondo, especially when Rubio went down. But like you said, Garland and Mobley, I think you just kind of ride the two young guns and see how far they can take you in the playoffs this year.
That's what I'm with. I mean, I think me and you at least were up on them for the over 27. And we were like, that's a lock. And they are already at 27 for this year. Yeah. Remember we were talking about that before, and it's like over 27.5. Like, that's easy. I also bet my two over bets that I put big this year were Cleveland and Memphis. So I felt pretty good about those two over unders in the season. But Cleveland's, outperformed everything. Just let it ride. You're playing with house money if you're a top 5 seed in the East anyways. Like this is just, it's all gravy at this point. So just let it ride, see what happens. If it doesn't work out, they faltered on the stretch. If the injuries get to be too much, so be it. The foundation that they've built for this year, for next year already is more than worth. It's more. The season's more than a success already, just by the foundation that they've built this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, we want to wrap up with our MVP picks. Who do you have right now as your NBA MVP about the halfway mark through the season?
Ja Morant.
Yep. I don't even think it's a question.
He's who I would give my vote to. And, we talked about how close the Eastern Conference is. We talked about how there's really only 3 juggernauts in the Western Conference. I just think the fact that they have the Grizzlies in the 3 seed, not many games back on the Phoenix Suns, not many games back on the Warriors. They're right there. They could, it's not out of the question they get to the 2 seed. I don't know if they would dethrone the Suns at any point this season. But, I mean, dude, Ja Morant, 24 points per game, nearly 6 rebounds a game, just under 7 assists a game, 48% from the field, 35% from 3. So I think that's something that he'll improve on throughout his career. Young guards usually do get better at shooting, as their career goes on. But there it is. For those not watching, playing, just some Ja highlights for the people. The 2-handed block from a couple weeks back. Yeah, I mean, Ja's my MVP right now. He's altering the game. He's altering the way his team wins in a bigger way than anyone else.
I couldn't agree more. That's why I put this as our current MVP. I knew we'd agree on this. It's not even a question, bro. It's Ja. It has to be. And if he keeps this up throughout the year, could be one of the youngest MVPs ever, and well deserved. So that'll do it today for our podcast. Follow us at Happy Hour Hoops 1. Subscribe to Happy Hour Hoops on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. You can give us 5 stars on Spotify now, so please do that. Give us 5 stars on Apple. Subscribe to us on YouTube. All that good stuff. Anything you want before you leave, Dunny?
No, I was just gonna say 5 stars for Ja, 5 stars for Happy Hour Hoops. Come on, lock it in, guys.
Lock it in. All right.
Stay
Have
hydrated.
a good night, folks. Stay hydrated. Enjoy the hoops. Enjoy the games tomorrow. Go watch Cleveland, Chicago, Memphis, Milwaukee. Great hoops this week.
Boston and Charlotte too.
There it is, Boston. Hey, Boston, Charlotte. That's a good matchup. That is going to be Boston and Charlotte the last couple years.
Tatum, come on.
Bro, but for real, they've had some of the most exciting games I've watched. I feel like every game. And I remember last year there was both those games were like 120, 121, like down to the final second. Crazy.
Terry Rozier just having games against Boston. It will all be there, guys.
Sounds about right. Yeah, so that's all great night of hoops on Wednesday night. So check it out. Check us out this week at Trainwreck Sports. Stay hydrated. Have a good week, folks.